Hello, this is Mr. Jarrett, and in this video tutorial we are going to be 3D modeling this object in SOLIDWORKS. So the first thing I'm going to take note of is where the origin is. So that's located down here. It's in the center of this circle. The second thing would be the materials. So that is IPS, or the units, sorry, not the materials. So when you're drawing this one, you can go about this in several different ways. Some people make this whole entire bottom piece one big slot and then they trim it later on. But I can tell you when you're trimming slots, sometimes it messes up all of your defined relations in there. So when you do a slot, it doesn't actually say that this is tangent, that's tangent. It's just a known thing because that's how the shape is built. So when you trim the line that's here, it no longer makes that tangent. So you lose the tangency there, and anything over here. It also sometimes makes these horizontal lines no longer horizontal, meaning they can kind of change on angles and such. So I am actually only going to use the straight slot for this. This portion down here, I'm going to be drawing that with just normal lines and arcs. And then this up here is actually a center point. Okay, it's off of the center, but it's an arcing slot. So that's what this is. This bigger piece is also the same thing. And yes, we will trim that. So you'll get an experience to see of how when you're trimming slots, it deletes your relations. So you'll see why I didn't do it down here. But I'm going to do a mixture of the two so you can see both. Okay, you're welcome to try this as a slot. Maybe you think, hey, it's not that bad. I'll just tell you that there's more things you have to fix than think through. Okay, so I'll pull this to the side and I will start by making a new part in SOLIDWORKS. And we're going to be drawing on our front plane. So I'll start out by getting my circle tool and take note of your units. I am already defaulted to IPS, so if you are not, please make sure you change that. But with my circle tool, I am going to draw this small circle around my origin, and I'll actually draw an arc, so a center point arc. Right from my origin, I'm going to move straight up, and I actually want this drawn around this way. I'll zoom out a little bit, zoom over here, and I'll dimension this. So this circle is 0.75. Okay, so I'm good so far. Let's get my line tool. Let's continue across. I'll hit escape, get my line tool again, continue across. This time this one goes way over here. And if yours did not automatically tangent, so I'll just delete one just to kind of show you. If yours did not automatically tangent like mine did, you can simply just click on the arc, hold in shift, click on the line, and set it to tangent. So you want tangency at both sides. And then I'll get this center point arc again to do this outside, but you don't really have a center point yet, so you don't necessarily know where that is. So let's just get the straight slot and draw this bottom slot. So we'll click here, kind of click over here, and draw out. Okay, now notice I have no dimensions. If your dimensions popped up, you're probably going to want to hit Control Z, undo that. So just to kind of show you, if you actually draw a slot and you have add dimensions, it grays them out. You can't even edit these, okay, which is rather annoying. So you actually have to delete them to edit them anyways. So I just have my edit dimension or add dimension off when I draw slots. Right, so this construction line is horizontal from my origin, so it's straight across. So if we make them coincident, it will lock the two in, so that now this can't go up or down. And then we can dimension this slot. And the reason why we need this slot figured out first is so that we can actually draw that center arc, or that center point arc. So this has a center length of 4, and it actually says from this center point over to my origin is a total of 8. Okay, and it has a radius. So just click on one of the end arcs, has a radius of 0.38. And now that's fully defined. So from here, this line itself actually slides in a little bit, and mine is not horizontal. I just noticed that. So I'm going to make sure that is horizontal. Okay, and it slides in a little bit. So this is actually straight up and down from the center point. So if you want to define this now, you can. I'm going to hold in shift and click that dot and the center point dot here. I'll make those vertical from one another. Now I can actually use my center point arc. And I'll go from this center point down to here, and I want to wrap up and around this way, and just stop somewhere. Okay, now I'll hit escape. I'll dimension this arc. This arc has a radius of 1, and you'll notice that arc's measurement actually defined all the rest of this. And now I have my blue dots. So everything's defined except for those blue dots. So that's good for the bottom. So that was pretty easy. Okay, if I did that with a slot, that's fine, but then you have to go back through and add a bunch of relations. So from here, what I would like to do is actually draw construction lines. So I'll get my line tool and check for construction. And from my origin, I'm going to draw up. I'll hit escape. Get my construction line again, and I'm going to draw out this way. And hit escape. Okay. Now I can go ahead and dimension these. So these are 60 degrees apart. And the reason why I chose to do these first is because it gives me a starting and stopping spot of my arc, okay, of my arcing slot. So these are 60 degrees apart. And the last thing you'll notice with these is there is a degrees between this one and a horizontal construction line, which we can just use the one in the actual slot itself. But really, you could use any horizontal line. And there's a degrees of 15 in there. Okay. Now it doesn't matter where these end. We can fix those up later if that bugs you. Those don't really matter as of right now. So from here, we're going to go to our slot tool, and you notice there's all different types. We actually want the center point arcing slot. And we will uncheck add dimensions, go from your origin, go up here, and I'm actually going to just do it right on my construction line. And make sure you're wrapping around the correct way. Mine's kind of being fussy here. Apologize. There we go. Zoom back in. Now you notice mine did not connect to anything. Doesn't have anything to connect to because my construction line isn't long enough. So I'm going to hit escape and try this again. I'll make my construction line a little bit longer, and I'll try that one more time. So origin to here, and now I can stop. Okay, and this will be the inside one. I'll try that one more time, and this time I'm going to select the center point of this arc, and then the center point of that arc, and I'll make this one bigger. Something like that. Okay. Now, if you're wondering why I kept resizing that, I wanted it to cross over this line. So I'm going to hit escape and trim. I have it set to trim to closest, and I'm going to zoom in and just start trimming away. So I'll trim here, I'll trim, hit OK. And now when I did that, it's going to, that just basically said, did you want to trim all of the different relations for that slot? And that's where I was talking about. You're going to run into problems. So I'll explain that then. And I'm not going to trim this yet. You'll see why. I'll just leave that here. Okay. And I'll drag this over until it touches. Now I'll trim that. Right, so now that they touch, hopefully we can add a fillet right in there. Sometimes that acts funky when it does that. Now by moving this around, I can already tell that this is going to cause us problems. You can actually see it took its construction line and everything else, and it really kind of moved this stuff around. So if I was drawing this for myself, I probably would have just used a normal arc tool for this, a normal arc tool for that, and this. But I do want to show you, because I know a lot of students we'll draw this with the actual arcing slot tool, I do want to show you the problems that you run into. So sometimes my videos are meant to be super efficient. Sometimes they're also meant to teach you some things. So in this case, it's kind of a mixture of both. The bottom was to teach you the efficiency. This part, however, is to teach you a little bit of a lesson. So I'm actually going to delete these little tiny pieces here. Those tiny pieces, if you're wondering what those are, that's actually the start of the curve for the bottom of this. So I'll delete those. Okay, and now with my openings, you can go ahead and fix this up a different way. So instead of putting in a fillet, I'm going to kind of create my own fillet without using the fillet tool. So this is kind of a unique thing that you can do. You can actually use what's called the perimeter circle. Perimeter circle, you can simply just click on these two different lines, okay, and draw your circle. And notice it made them tangent to both. So we'll try doing it with the dots as well. I don't think you can really do it with the dot. So I did it with one dot, and then I'm just going to select the line with the other one. Okay, and you need a third click. So these have 3 clicks. Okay, so 3 different clicks. So now we can trim the outsides. And you notice we kind of just made our own little fillet. So you have a bunch to trim because of this construction line. You might actually have to zoom in here a little bit and see what you need to trim. Now I made it tangent in all the spots except for this one for me, and I think that's because I actually clicked on that dot instead of the line. So if we hold in shift and we select those two, we can get tangent. And there's our fake fillets. They work the same, but you can dimension these now. And this one has a radius of 0.75. The other one over here has a much bigger radius, and that is 1.62. Okay. Now again, going back to trimming a slot, you notice it deleted the relations here. So I'm going to drag this back to that construction line. I'm actually going to select that arc, hold in shift and select this arc and make sure they are tangent. Okay, and I'll do the same thing up here. Make sure that these are tangent. I actually want to make sure, just double checking, that it is stuck on that construction line. Okay, so I think everything's good. I can tell you that when you make a slot, it puts a little center dot of everything. So if you had everything fully defined, it would still say underdefined because we still have this little tiny point just hanging out here. So find the point that's just floating in the middle. It's not attached to anything. Just hit delete on your keyboard. Okay. This construction line over here that extends past, if that's bothering you, you can drag this up so it just connects to this construction line. And again, if these extension construction lines bother you, drag them in until they touch something else. That's fine. Okay, now we can go ahead and dimension the rest of this. So the construction line itself from our origin is a radius of 7 away. The outside arc here, this one, has a radius of 1. Inside one is a radius of 0.38. And now we're fully defined. Again, if you do not have the words fully defined down here, you probably have a tiny little blue dot hanging out somewhere in here. Okay, so you can see this one, you can run into a lot of problems if you try to use the slot tools and trim them. Just to kind of show you how I would do this portion, I'll draw that over here really quick. You simply, if you had a line coming across, say you had your arc floating up here like this, okay? So this arc, say, is this, and this line is this. You could have drawn from a center point, which would have been your origin, could have just drawn your arc kind of floating down this way and drawn the same thing again, something like that. Now, where these two crossed, then you could have actually filleted those. So this crossing here would be this fillet, and down in here, you would just need kind of a fillet where those two cross, and that would be this portion. So you wouldn't have had to trim a whole bunch of stuff and fix up a whole bunch of stuff. There's different ways of doing everything, but for right now, this thing is fully defined. We got to that point, so that's good. So let's go to features and hit extrude. And this has a material thickness of 0.8, and it is negative for our Z, so that means we're going to be going backwards. We'll hit the green check. We'll change our materials to alloy steel, and that is not a default, so you're going to have to hit edit materials. And alloy steel is right there. You do not want the one that says SS. Hit apply and close, and let's evaluate this. And you should get a mass of 6.39 pounds. Your X should be positive, your Y should be positive, and your Z should be negative. If you got that, you can save it and move on to the next one. If you didn't, please try to problem solve and figure out where you went wrong.